Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to Evolving Consciousness. I'm your host Purushottam, and in today's video, we are going to continue the series which we started a couple of days back on this phenomenal book called As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, and we are going to explore the second chapter of this book, which talks about the effect of thoughts and circumstances. This is officially part 2 of that section, meaning part 1 of that section has already been uploaded in the channel. If you haven't gone through that, I will highly recommend you to go through that before viewing this video. However, you can obviously get value out of it because it doesn't have a storyline as such, but it can serve as a good reference point for you. Now, for folks who are probably looking at As a Man Thinketh for the first time, As a Man Thinketh is a book written by James Allen, which was written probably in the early 1900s, and the main focus and theme of this book is to make us understand and enlighten us on the principles of thoughts and how they have a direct or indirect impact on every dimension of our life. And most of the time, it's unconscious. We are not conscious of it. Now, coming back to the focus of this video, in this video we are going to continue from the video which we left, wherein we were discussing the different lessons which we can draw from on the effect of thoughts and circumstances. Let me do a quick recap for your benefit. Now, we talked about certain principles that circumstances grow out of thought, and he said justice is exact, wherein we expanded what he meant by circumstances growing out of thought, right? Because we normally understand that circumstances trigger thoughts, but essentially it's the other way around. Circumstances grow out of thoughts, but we are being conditioned to believe and think that thoughts are created by circumstances. So if you want to explore the mechanics and the different manifestations of this concept, I would recommend you to go and watch that video. Now, coming back to the third lesson of that particular chapter. Now, something which is very intricate and something which is very nuanced, and oftentimes you don't understand this particular concept. James talks about the ignorance which mankind is heavily infected with. Now, what do I mean by ignorance? Now, he says that good cannot produce evil. Good cannot produce evil. Let me expand on that a little bit. Oftentimes, when we see people who have been successful in certain dimension of their life, let's say a person is very rich, let's say a person has a lot of his material possessions, but we might have a very myopic judgment of that person and say that person doesn't deserve this wealth. This person has acquired wealth through frivolous means, or means which are not appropriate. Now, James says that most of us don't have a holistic standpoint of judgment. The person who you are labeling as corrupt, or you are labeling him as not a good person, probably there are certain facets of his personality which you are failing to acknowledge. Because he always says good cannot produce evil. There might be certain dimensions, certain qualities in that person which made him eligible for that material wealth. And he also says that if he has certain shortcomings, he is bound to suffer. He is bound to fail in that dimension. But we shouldn't assume and think that because of his corrupt practices, that person is rich. No, that's not the case. That is a very superficial way of looking at things. I know this might be very hard to digest when you first try to comprehend this concept, but I promise you that if you go through these words which James has put, and he has given 3 examples of ignorance which I will just read out to better illustrate this point of view. Now let's go to what he says, right? So the 3 examples of ignorance I would like to read out from the book. He says, men are anxious to improve their circumstances but are unwilling to improve themselves. This makes logical sense. They therefore remain bound. The man who does not shrink from self-crucifixion can never fail to accomplish the object upon which his heart is set. So basically he's saying that people who play the victim card, they are never going to succeed. They seldom succeed. Whatever dreams and ambitions they have in their heart, if they're always going to blame the circumstances, the weather, the history, the geography, they are always in the self-crucified zone, meaning they are always playing the victim card. And unless they realize that they are the master architect of the future, they are always going to relish, they are always are addicted to this victim mindset, and they are never going to actually live their dreams. Their dreams will be dreams. Their dreams will never be converted to reality. He says, even the man whose sole object is to acquire wealth must be prepared to make great personal sacrifices before he can accomplish his object. And how much more so he who would realize a strong and well poised life. Now, this is a point which we all know about. This is a point which everyone talks about, right? If you see any great person, right, a person who has done something great in his life, oftentimes that person has gone through a lot of sacrifices. When the world was busy enjoying their life, having a happy time, this person was giving his utmost attention, focus, and sheer hard work to his goals, to his lofty ambitions. Because without sacrifice, no one has done anything substantial. Just look at history. History is filled with legends who sacrificed their own time, their time of comfort, their time of fooling around here and there. They sacrificed that because they were in love with the desire, with the dreams of their heart, and they knew the price they had to pay to achieve those goals. As Elon Musk rightly put, he said, there are no free lunches. People who believe in wishful thinking, they are going to be very much disappointed, because if you are not someone who is willing to make the sacrifice in any dimension, even if you want to build a good physique, you need to make a lot of sacrifice. You need to come out of that comfort of being lethargic, the comfort of being at ease with your body. Because when you exercise with the very first time, there's a lot of discomfort, there's a lot of suffering. You need to sacrifice your personal zones of complacency for you to achieve that milestone. Now, this can be applied to any dimension, right? So nowadays, sacrifice is being considered a negative word, right? But sacrifice, if you deeply understand, it is the source of all great achievements, whether in the mental plane, whether in the material plane, or in the spiritual plane. People who have done great in the material world, they have made great, huge sacrifices. People who have done exceptionally well in the spiritual dimension, they also made great sacrifices. So that's what James is talking about here. And now he comes to the practical nuance examples, the three examples which he's talking about here. He says, here is a man who's wretchedly poor. In the sense, he's extremely poor, he's extremely anxious that his surroundings and home comfort should be improved. Yet all the time he shirks his work and considers he's justified in trying to deceive his employer on the ground of insufficiency of his wages. Now, this is a beautiful concept which James is trying to highlight, right? Most of us, when we are not paid enough in our job, we stop giving the best in that job, right? This is natural human mindset, because for us, if the kind of results we get, if we are not getting that, then we stop putting the effort, right? But if you look at it, that is the very reason probably you are getting such low salary or low wage, right? Such a man does not understand the simplest rudiments of those principles which are the basis of true prosperity, and is not only totally unfitted to rise out of his wretchedness, but is actually attracting to himself a still deeper wretchedness by dwelling in and acting out indolent, deceptive, and unmanly thoughts. To be lethargic is unmanly. He's saying, if you are a true man, not in the understanding of male, female, but he's saying being lethargic is being an unman, right? Engaging yourself in unmanly thoughts. A man is considered someone who is active, enthusiastic. And one very important dimension which we need to notice here is, no matter what your current situations and opportunities are, you might be working in a very small firm, right? But if you stop giving your best in that particular work or activity because of the fact that you're being paid less, then that's a sure recipe for failure. Now, let me give you an example of a legend who probably you can relate with. When Shah Rukh Khan entered the film industry, he wasn't given very good roles, right? So he was given antagonist roles, and in his early career he was a sidekick. If you look at the television series of Fauji and Circus, you will realize that most of his early shows he was a sidekick, but that did not let him from performing at his peak. His roles as an antagonist, as well as the roles which was sort of a sidekick, which portrayed him as a sidekick, he played it to the best of his capability. And I can also relate this with the concept of Bhagavad Gita, right? In one of the chapters, Lord Krishna talks about the dignity which we need to have towards work. Now, this is also something which I can relate from the book The Leader Who Had No Title by Robin Sharma, wherein says it doesn't matter whether you are an Uber driver, whether you are a bathroom janitor, whether you are a street sweeper, it doesn't really matter. No matter what quality of work you're doing, no matter how feeble your income is, what matters is the dignity of work which you put into it. You need to be a leader in doing the smallest of activities. You need to give your best in doing the smallest of activities. No matter how limited your opportunities are, no matter how limited your current scope of work is, you need to give your best. That's what James is talking about. The people who play victim, the people who say that the opportunities are causing me to behave in such a way, he's saying they don't realize that they are the source of their own suffering. Now, he gives another scenario, another example. He says, here is a rich man who is the victim of a painful and persistent disease as a result of gluttony. Now, gluttony means having desires which are not natural, right? Having desires which are probably excess. Probably having very unnatural desires. Like it can be anything, a lot of intoxication and things which are not required, right? Mahatma Gandhi put it so well. He said, the world has enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. I want to repeat that. The world has enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. Right? So, somebody is rich, but he has gluttonous desires. He is going to suffer with a certain disease, which is going to sort of petrify him and haunt him for a very long time. And he gives another example. Here's an employer of labor who adopts crooked measures to avoid paying the regulation wage and in the hope of making larger profits reduces the wages of his workpeople. Such a man is altogether unfitted for prosperity, and when he finds himself bankrupt both as regards to his reputational riches, he blames circumstances, not knowing that he is the sole author of his condition. He says that these three cases merely as illustrative of the truth that man is the causer, mostly unconscious, of his circumstances, and that whilst aiming at a good end, he is continually frustrating its accomplishment by encouraging thoughts and desires which cannot possibly harmonize with that end. Such cases could be multiplied and varied almost indefinitely. So he's saying these are three mere examples which he has brought about, but there can be countless examples of how you can see that a certain manifestation, certain particular result can be traced back to its source thought, right? Can be traced back to the source thought which was instrumental in creating that. Now comes to the central concept here. He says good cannot produce evil. The circumstances, however so complicated, thought is so deeply rooted and conditions of happiness vary so vastly with individuals that a man's entire soul condition cannot be judged by another from the external aspect of his life alone. A man may be honest in certain directions, yet suffer privations. A man may be dishonest in certain directions, yet acquire wealth. But the conclusion usually formed that one man fails because of his particular honesty and that the other man prospers because of his particular dishonesty is the result of superficial judgment. This is what I was talking about in the initial part of the video. We have a very superficial way, a very myopic lens through which we view reality. We don't have a holistic standpoint because we have a limited intellect. We see that certain people are extremely rich, they have all the material possessions at their disposal, and we probably might be thinking that person doesn't deserve all this. But essentially, there are certain qualities in that person which we are not able to look at because we already have certain filters of hatred, certain filters of judgment towards that person, which is not allowing us to look at those aspects. Now, in the light of a deeper knowledge and wider experience, such judgment is found to be erroneous. The dishonest man may have some admirable virtues, which the other does not possess, and the honest man obnoxious vices which are absent in another. The honest man reaps the good results of his honest thoughts and acts. He also brings upon himself the sufferings which his vices produce. It is pleasing to human vanity to believe that one suffers because of one's virtue. Now, this is a huge point, right? Most of us like to believe, like to feel pleased by saying that this is a world where the bad prosper, right? But James says that this is human vanity, and it's pleasing for them to feel this way and think that way because they want to shirk from responsibility. They want to say that this person probably is so rich because of certain aspects and attributes. But he says that until a man is extirpated every sickly, bitter and impure thought from his mind and washed every sinful stain from his soul, can he be in a position to know and declare that his sufferings are the result of his good and not of his bad qualities, and on the way to yet long before he has reached that supreme perfection, he will have found working in his mind and life the great law, which is absolutely just and which cannot therefore produce good for evil and evil for good. Because let's understand, we human beings are very limited in terms of our understanding, in terms of our intellect. There is a cosmic law, there is a cosmic standpoint, viewpoint, which sort of gauges every person, and every person, this present reality in which he is in, he is responsible for that. That's what James is saying, that most of us don't have that level of evolved consciousness to view reality as it is. I talked about this concept of fractured reality in one of my videos where it talks about what is fractured reality and how often we human beings consider to look at reality in a fractured way because we are conditioned with certain thought process, certain belief systems. And James says, when you possess this knowledge, or at least you understand this knowledge, you begin to realize that everything is perfectly just. The cosmic law is always perfect and it cannot possibly err. It is as accurate as the law of gravity. It is as accurate as the law of physics. It's only our erroneous judgment, it's the only our superficial judgment, our inability to judge and derive conclusive references which makes us to build the superficial judgments, right? That this person is good, he didn't do anything, this person is evil, he achieved so much thing. That's not the case. He says good cannot produce evil. That's not possible. Now the third lesson which he talks about, he says you are what you think. Right? This makes sense. Good thoughts and actions can never produce bad results. Bad thoughts and actions can never produce good results. This is but saying that nothing can come from corn but corn, nothing from nettles but nettles. Men understand this law in the natural world and work with it, but few understand it in the mental and moral world. Though it's operating, there is just as simple and undeviating, and they therefore do not cooperate with it. He says suffering is always the effect of wrong thought in some direction. The beautiful quote which says, pain is inevitable, suffering is option. Right? He says that suffering, human beings suffer because 90% of today's suffering is psychological, right? We are a victim of our own thinking. He says that effect of wrong thought in some direction. It is an indication that the individual is out of harmony with himself, the law of his being. The sole and supreme use of suffering is to purify, to burn out all that is useless and impure. Suffering ceases for whom? For him who is pure. There could be no object in burning gold after the dross had been removed, and a perfectly pure and enlightened being could not suffer. Now this is the reason why people who are enlightened, right, they cannot suffer, even though they are subjected to the most gruesome pain, they still don't suffer. I am reminded of a beautiful excerpt from the life of Sri Ramana Maharishi, phenomenal sage of modern India, right? He is probably the most advanced level of jnana yogis this planet has ever seen. Now Ramana Maharishi had to go through an arm surgery. The arm surgery was such, he was to be sort of amputated, one of his arms was supposed to be cut, and the doctors ran out of anesthesia. right? And they did ask Mr. Ramana Maharishi that, sir, we probably won't be able to ampute your arm today, we probably need to delay it because we don't have anesthesia. You know what Ramana Maharishi did? He said, go ahead. Yes, you heard that right. He said, go ahead, ampute my arm, I won't make a noise. Now, this is a very gross physical manifestation of how the enlightened yogis, they go above suffering. Pain was still there, his body could still feel the pain, but his consciousness couldn't suffer because he has made his consciousness evolve to such a level that suffering is not an option for him. Suffering is an alien term in the dictionary of his consciousness. Now, this is not to say that we all need to be enlightened, but essentially to build this awareness about the mechanics of thought sort of pushes us towards the line of becoming more enlightened, or at least becoming more aware, because suffering is always optional. Now, you can think of something which happened 10 years back and you can suffer in the present moment, right? So this shows how important our mind is. And it says the circumstances which a man encounters is suffering as the result of his own mental disharmony. The circumstances which a man encounters is blessedness as the result of his own mental harmony. Blessedness, not material possessions, is the measure of right thought. Wretchedness, not the lack of material possessions, is the measure of wrong thought. A man may be cursed and rich. He may be blessed and poor. Blessedness and riches are only joined together when the riches are rightly and wisely used. And the poor man only descends into wretchedness when he regards his lot as a burden unjustly imposed. Now, there is a beautiful thing which I heard in a podcast, in a video series called Technology of Spirituality, wherein the speaker, Kushit Batliawala from Art of Living, he said something very beautiful. He said that most of us think that people who become spiritual, right, they don't grow a lot in the material dimension. Now, this is a very foolish fallacy. It is the fact remains that people who are spiritual, they lose interest in material possession. That doesn't mean that they are incapable of achieving the peak in material dimension. He said that Lord Vishnu and Lord Lakshmi, they are the eternal couple. They never had a divorce. So Lord Vishnu is the indicator of eternal spiritual wisdom, and Lord Mahalakshmi, as you are probably aware, she is the Devi of all the opulences and all the abundance and wealth available in this planet. So if you are someone who is truly spiritually wise, it just cannot happen that you won't be bestowed with abundance and wealth. Now that's a different story if you don't choose to have that. I'm not talking about that, but essentially I'm inviting you to consider to completely disregard the school of thought which says that people who become spiritual, they don't become materially accomplished, right? So this was one of the things. And he says at the last aspect is discover the hidden powers within. He says that acknowledge the power, the fountain of power which exists within each human being, the potential of thought. A man who begins to be a man when he ceases to whine and revive and commences to search for the hidden justice which regulates his life. And as he adapts his mind to that regulating factor, he ceases to accuse others as the cause of his condition and builds himself in strong and noble thoughts, ceases to kick against circumstances but begins to use them as aids to his more rapid progress. And as a means of discovering the hidden powers and possibilities within himself, law, not confusion, is the dominating principle in the universe. Justice, not injustice, is the soul and substance of life. And righteousness, not corruption, is the molding and moving force in the spiritual government of the world. This being so, man has but to right himself to find that the universe is right, and during the process of putting himself right, he will find that as he alters his thoughts towards things and other people will alter towards him. The proof of this truth is in every person, and it therefore admits of easy investigation by systematic introspection and self-analysis. Let a man radically alter his thoughts, and he will be astonished at the rapid transformation it will effect in the material conditions of his life. Now, recently I was reading a book called The Map of Consciousness by Dr. David Hawkins, where he was giving a beautiful concept from quantum physics and quantum mechanics. It's called the observer effect. He said that just by observing a certain condition, a certain thought, the thought starts to mutate, or in simple terms, it starts to change. If you have a certain intention behind observing certain thing, the subatomic particles change, right? Now, there's a beautiful experiment by a Japanese scientist. I'll make a full-blown video on that, but just to give a very brief introduction, that person did an experiment called the water experiment, where he sort of subjected the water to different human emotions, the emotions of love, gratitude, positive appreciation, happiness. And in the other side of the spectrum, there were negative thoughts like jealousy, hatred, anger, revenge, melancholy. And he saw palpable microscopic shifts in the molecules of water. Now, what more evidence do we need that thoughts can impact matter? I hope this video made sense to you and brought about a new vision to look at thoughts and how powerful the thoughts can be for each one of us. I hope you enjoyed my today's video, and I would sincerely request your candid feedback on my today's video. What did you like about the video? And also, if any constructive criticism is there about the video. And also, if you really enjoyed this video, don't forget to make this video viral, share it with your community, as many people as possible, and also try to understand the magnanimity of thoughts and try to be more conscious, because our channel, the name of our channel is Evolving Consciousness. And my humble attempt in sharing these things so that you can acknowledge the power which is there within each one of us, the latent Hanuman, which is sort of sleeping, he doesn't even know his potential. My humble attempt is sort of to make you aware of the powers which are latent within you. Once you acknowledge that, that's half the battle. Thank you so much for your time on your video. I'm sincerely grateful for your time on your video, and we'll meet in the next video in the series of As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. Thank you so much, and meet you in the next video. Bye.